So that went well, huh? Wonderful. It is Thursday, January the 2nd, 2025. I almost blew that. I am Dan Rubin. This is the glorious Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. As good as you expected it to be. Even you didn't expect it to be that good. You got a little fired up during the game. You know what you need? Mando. Our sponsor for today. Good gracious. A lot of companies could have advertised with us in this week. One company chose to do that. Mando. So they knew something. Did Mando know something? I'll tell you what they do know. This is the way to smell good if you are a man. Whole body deodorant, safe anywhere on your body, developed by doctors. Got some bunch of fancy technical stuff in there that I don't understand, but makes you smell great for a longer period of time. Clinically proven to block odor all day. Control it for over 72 hours. I've got a starter pack for our new customers. If you're feeling good about life, and I am, take advantage of the one company that had faith in the Buckeyes during this week to advertise with us. Get their Mando's starter pack. Solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. You'll end up getting $5 off the starter pack. That's 40% off. Use code Bucknuts, BUCKNUTS, at shopmando.com. Support our show and tell them we sent you. All right. Bill Mark. The great Bill Kurlick, the Dean, the great Mark Porter, the Grand Poobah. We've been doing this show, it feels like, for a while. I don't even know how to start the show. That was so glorious. I guess I'll say it like this, and I'll just turn it over to you guys. Well, Mark, I want to let you start the show today. I have borderline begged for a turnover-free performance. We got it, and good Lord, it looked even better than I thought in person. The floor is yours. There's a lot to give credit for. Take it and run with it and enjoy it.
Yeah, you hate having to predict these games 2 days ago, thinking it was going to be a close game and being nervous and anxious that, you might not be able to win this team. And I built it as a national championship game, maybe the 2 best teams in the country. And it did not look like that even a little bit. I'll be the first one to say everyone has their day, and sometimes it's not your day. But, boy, that type of offensive explosion and that type of team, I think it almost makes you mad because you say, where was that team all year? And I kind of asked myself, why wasn't that team around all year? And it took a perfect storm or mixture of chemicals to get this team to play like that. That ass whipping at Michigan, that's still coming out. There's still, frustration from that game. You can see it on the field. So, yeah, maybe it took a little while for this team to get rolling, but this is what the greatest roster at ever Ohio State should look like. This is how you should play. You essentially turned Oregon into a MAC program in the first half. There are MAC teams that would have played you harder in a half of football than Oregon did. Hard to believe or even think that. I know Oregon had a couple injuries. I'm looking for the built-in excuses. The other thing I got to say is, with a new coordinator in Chip Kelly this year and a lot of new players coming in from other schools and some new starters on offense, maybe it did take a while to get things to where they knew exactly who they were and what they were. But just the domination from running the ball to throwing the ball. Finally, Jeremiah Smith, and I shouldn't say finally, but had a game where, on a stage that just will cement his national presence the way we feel about him. I don't know if everybody outside of Bucknuts Nation knew Jeremiah Smith, but they will now. But, yeah, fun. And I think for Buckeye fans, how stress-free was that immediately? Don't you love those games where you, like you're saying, like sat back and, by the end of the third quarter, I'm, scrolling other things on the web while I'm watching the game because it's disinteresting.
William, we chatted briefly before we went on the air, and I will admit, and I think you will too, that there was a split second when we got a little verklempt when Oregon got that touchdown to open the second half after a ridiculous second down, like 20, whatever. Anyway.
3rd and 21, if I remember right.
Yeah, and then he hit the guy, and they went for it on 4th and 2 or whatever, 4th and 1. Just your thoughts on the game, Bill. This was not your first Buckeye game, and no, seriously, we've seen such a gamut of emotions from the team and the fans. Just where are you right now with the team, and then maybe finish it off with you get to go talk to the recruits and get to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, as the game was going on and immediately afterwards, I was jotting down some notes and came up with 2 of kind of our the Bucknuts front row message board whipping boys. One of them, Jim Knowles, remember? Back when there were a lot of complaints about Jim Knowles, his defense, and how he couldn't stop a good team. And then Justin Fry and his recruiting and the offensive line. And those 2 areas came up huge last night. You know, the whole staff from Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, all the way through did a great job of preparation. That was a very prepared team, ready to play team. But Jim Knowles, I thought some of the things he did last night were just tremendous. A couple of them that I mentioned. Cody Simon spying at times Dylan Gabriel. That was key. You could see him at different camera shots that were, Cody Simon is spying him and he making sure he's not going to impact the game with his feet or scrambling and then finding open people. I thought that was a fantastic job of planning by Jim Knowles. And then the defensive line, including Larry Johnson, another one of the whipping boys at times on the front row. The defensive line, first of all, was physical. They just dominated Oregon physically up front. They really dominated that offensive line, Oregon. But the plan seemed to me, and I mentioned this, I was watching the game with my son, who is a pretty avid Ohio State fan and aficionado. I mentioned how their plan had to have included keeping Dylan Gabriel in the pocket, making him throw over 6'5" Jack Sawyer, 6'4" JT Tuimoloau, and so on. If you watch the defensive end at times, the defensive ends at times, they did not rush out of control. At times, it looked like they were going to make sure that maybe they didn't get the sack, but they were going to keep Dylan Gabriel in the pocket and then get the pressure on him after that. So I thought that was a fantastic plan to make Gabriel stay in that pocket, try to throw over our big guys, not get out, and stay in your rush lanes. And finally, if need be, get to Gabriel. And I just thought that was a fantastic play. Fantastic plan. Turning to Justin Fry. How many teams in the country, out of your 5 offensive linemen, can lose the best center in the country, of course, McLaughlin, and lose a maybe first-round NFL left tackle, if not at worst second round? Will Campbell from LSU, I think, is going to be the first tackle to go off the board, in my opinion. But Josh Simmons, he's going to be up there. So you lose those to your 2 key guys on the offensive line and still perform as well as that offensive line did last night. You can say what you want, and I agree. Justin Fry has not been able to get the top out-of-state offensive lineman, but he sure has done the job in the portal. He's got 2 more coming in this year, Ethan Anianwa and Phillip Daniels, and he got McLaughlin, he got Josh Simmons, and he has, for the most part, kept the offensive lineman in Ohio at home. But those guys were ready to play, and I think they dominated the Oregon defensive line to some extent. So, those were my immediate thoughts. And then something we talked about last week, I think you brought it up, Dan. the size of the Oregon defensive backs as compared to the size of the Ohio State wide receivers. It was a mismatch, and they took advantage of that.
It's funny you say that, Bill. I don't know if anyone had this feeling. At the opening coin toss, our players are a lot bigger than theirs. Did you notice that? They had a lineman stand out there that was like as big as Emeka and someone else. And sometimes I just forget, and this has been commented by many people who have been on the sideline for Ohio State games. They're enormous. You know what I mean? We're a huge football team compared to the other guys. You said a lot there, and I want to comment on that. Just going back, I know everyone loves to hear from me more than you guys. Not at all, but I have a lot to say today. And if you're the publisher of Bucknuts, today is the day for an extra cup of coffee. But I digress. We talked about Dylan Gabriel kind of ad nauseum, even going into the last game, how the last game meaning the original meeting out at Austin, how they got to Gabriel was going to determine the game, and that's what happened. Bill, you mentioned their ability to keep him in the pocket. Most of the plays he made that I remember were when he did escape the pocket. He's a really good quarterback, but that was when it was a complete scramble drill. Anything they did by design, we were on top of. It's very interesting to me that we talk about the Michigan game from the offensive perspective and that it showed us what we absolutely should not and cannot do again. I almost think that the first game against Oregon showed the defense that, because the plan could not have been more different than the first time around. It was a completely different approach. Not only are they just, and I think you hear people commenting about playing with just a violent aggression. It seems like in this game, if you look, the personnel they used, same two linebackers, same defensive backs. There wasn't as much rotating there. Defensive line actually rotated a little bit, which was fantastic. The other thing that jumped out to me, the defensive line one-on-ones, they just were way better. You want to talk about two guys who maybe haven't made themselves some money, but solidified themselves, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. I think Tyreek Williams made himself some money last night. When you are a defensive tackle that shows you can penetrate consistently and affect the quarterback, you are a big deal. He may have played himself into the end of the first round. That wouldn't surprise me. As far as Josh Simmons versus Will Campbell, I don't believe Campbell will be picked in front of Simmons. The people that I really trust on the draft, put it this way, had Simmons played the whole season, I don't think there will be any question he'd be the first left tackle taken or first tackle taken. Now it could go either way. I've even heard some people think Will Campbell is better off as a guard. All right, Mark, I talked about the no turnovers. At one point in time yesterday, did you realize it was a repeat performance? Because all I heard going into it was the hardest thing in college football to do is put together back-to-back performances. And Ohio State didn't do that. They did better than the one before that, which was already the best. Is there a sign? Did the defense change schematically? What was it to you that really kind of, you said, eased you up in the third quarter? When did you really know we were cruising?
Boy, I know Oregon scored right before halftime, but it didn't feel like they were even in the game. It didn't even feel like you said, when you saw them at the coin toss, it just looked like one team was so much bigger, stronger, faster at will. We haven't seen Buckeye drives go at 3 plays, 1 play, 5 plays. Every time you looked at the drive, it wasn't like a 12-play grind it out. They just tore through this defense like they weren't there. The holes that were there, the getting of the edge on the run plays, it was almost scary how easy they did it. And that's what I'm saying. As an analyst, and, I know I'm not, more of the high school and recruiting guy, but when it comes to watching these games, I definitely put my time in and watch them. You just couldn't see this coming. And it reminds me of, because I'm a Niners fan from the 80s, 90s, and, Dan's Dallas, when those teams started peaking at the end of the year. And what I mean by that is, like I alluded to it earlier, this is Chip Kelly's first year with these guys. They didn't know the nuances of his offense weeks 1 through 5. They weren't totally anticipating everything that happens with his reads and what he's teaching you. But I think as they start peaking in this offense, boy, to put points like that at your defense's back so early, you said, what did the defense do better? How about having 14 or 21 points at your back in the first quarter and freeing you up to, try a few things or getting some coverages and not worrying if you give up a big play or something. I think the defense almost pinned its ears back with that freedom of having that lead. And you saw them like you said, our offense and defensive lines have taken criticism here. This shuts up all the critics. This type of game makes it so hard to find any flaws or find any reason to get rid of coaches or players. And even when we win, there's always a mantra of, okay, what can we do better? I'm not sure what they could have done much better in this game, other than shutting them out the entire game.
Yeah, it was great. It looked like Tez Jackson. I don't know. I'm blanking on his last name. Yeah, Tez John and then Jordan Johnson. They got the Buckeye flu there about halfway through the first half. They're like, no, I'm not going to be taking 30 hits at running back in a game we're down 3 touchdowns. I'll be sitting on the sideline for the rest of the game.
It's funny, like my kids are at an age when little kids start losing, the other team starts crying. Yeah. And you almost know that as a coach, like, hey, they're crying. This should be easy the rest of the way. I actually pointed out to my kids, I'm like, there's 2 guys that have checked themselves out already. What does that mean? He's like, oh, the whole team's crying. And it looked like a little team that just started crying and couldn't get their composure back. Like, I can't believe we're getting beat this bad. This is a nightmare for us. And it just hit Oregon like a wave of like 8-year-old kids where the bench was a mess, the parents were a mess, the coaches were a mess. And, that's definitely fun for Buckeye fans.
This is a good point. After James got blasted by Lathan Ransom, he didn't want to hit the hole any longer. If you look up how to fill a hole as a safety and run support, that we're going to have do we have like a video dictionary now? That'll be like a little video next to that. That was spectacular. All right. Another funny thing here I want to mention that Dietrich kind of brought up there. Do you know what I don't know if you guys are like me, but back in the day when your team would have like, and I'm going to use the Cowboys as an example, win a Super Bowl, they would come out with like a video and it would have like, return to glory. There would be like I think if we win this year, it's just going to be in quotes, BTA. That's a new acronym that everyone knows now. If you don't know what it means, belt to rump.
Bring the alcohol.
Yeah, well, after the post-game show, that's why I wasn't on it.
The Kent State Flash has used that, and it wasn't beat that.
Yeah.
ASS.
Well,
it was be the alpha.
Yeah.
Or better than Akron. There were a lot of BTA acronyms that you could have, but bring the alcohol is the one you don't want if you're the head coach of the team.
Look at this guy. There are some real donks up in here. No offense. Data Ghost. See, I want to thank you because you're the people that got us our bonus. All the Michigan and Oregon fans who put us over the top. Mika getting loose. All right. Okay. Also, here's another thing that's coming through. We talked a lot about depth and how that Ohio State is shown that they had the depth. And when we talked about the roster, we really didn't know practically how that would be applied down the stretch because, as we said, the playoffs were uncharted waters. Boy, Travion Henderson looked fresh. Quinshon Judkins looked fresh. What a great adjustment they made in the second half, too. They went to that kind of like left side group sweep. You know that play, Mark? Did you notice that? They figured out they had a weakness there, and that became 9-10 yards. That reminded me of like Zeke back in the playoffs where you just pitch it left, and you're literally – Brandon Inniss is a pulling guard now. That guy was coming for it. I love Brandon Inniss. Go ahead.
He had a couple devastating blocks.
He's coming for your tail too, man.
Yep.
There is no like anything but fifth gear for that dude. And the fact that that's a guy who like at another program would probably have 60 receptions, but in here he's blocking, it's just spectacular.
Just to get the edge like that. You know how hard it is to get the edge on a defense this time of the year when they've been coached up all year to not give you the edge. I I couldn't believe it. I mentioned it earlier. The edge just was so soft for Oregon that became just a middle school pitch play where, hey, we're going to go get 6 yards around the edge.
And it's kind of stream of consciousness here, giving credit. Donovan Jackson, he thoroughly outplayed whoever he was against. You talk about getting the edge. He was getting the edge easily on the end. The fact that guy was willing to do that, and he's like one of your closet MVPs of the season. The move to left tackle is at this level. I mean, he's going against pros, and just totally kicking tail. That was tremendous.
Going back, that reminds me of a story of Donovan Jackson. I got to know his dad pretty well during the recruiting process, and when I was in Texas for the All-American game, Donovan was playing in that game, and I talked to his dad in person and all that. We talked about what position he would play at Ohio State at that point. And I remember his dad's, he's 6'4", so that makes a tackle kind of questionable, but he's that good. He can play that. And his dad felt like, it's pretty wide open. Donovan could end up as a guard or tackle at Ohio State. And his dad felt very confident that Donovan could be just as good a tackle really as a guard at Ohio State. And we saw that this season. He's moved to tackle just with seemingly transitionless move. He's maybe even been better at tackle than guard. He's done so well.
He did.
And I did see that today about that Mr. Jackson called out. Do you have that up there on the screen, Dan?
I think when they say Big Dave, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that Big Dave Uyunglele?
Yes.
Yeah, his son had a very good game against Ohio State the first time around. And the second time around, I think he had a good game the first time around. So let's just say it like that. These are all good. There'll be a lot of charred duck, longhorn steak. It is kind of interesting, however, that Ohio State has to go to Jerry World to play Texas. That doesn't feel that fair. And then if Georgia beats Notre Dame and Penn State, they'd play Georgia and Atlanta. Just all the more reason to print the BTA T-shirts. Get those shirts printed. Send me a cut.
I looked at that and thought, Penn State, the 4 teams got the bye, and Penn State got the 5th bye to the Final Four, basically. And then Ohio State is going basically for 2 road games, as you mentioned, Dan. They're going into basically their home games, providing they win, and I feel pretty good about their chances to win. Providing they win, it's going to be 2 basically home games for their team. Now, again, I'm not complaining. It's just that kind of awkward the way that worked out, let me say.
We will travel well. We know that. I'll tell you what, and this is just me, and I said this going in, the Rose Bowl to me is just where it's at. That is just, I've had the good fortune of having another team win a big game there. That place is just spectacular, man. There's nothing better than watching your team rip people apart at the Rose Bowl. I'm serious. Those are like some of the most beautiful background situations you'll ever see. Now let's talk about an individual that deserves, his own show. It's funny, there was some chatter during Naeem Offord's recruitment bill when he flipped from Ohio State to Oregon that he was doing it because they were going to make him a shoe. I'll tell you who deserves a shoe. The Air Jeremiah. Okay, you want to make a shoe for somebody? You want to put together something for someone who's like going to be remembered for a long time? I don't know who to compare. I said to my son, we are now at the point with Jeremiah Smith that anything you say hyperbolically, you can't be like, no. I think there was something called the Tyson zone at one point in time where it's like anything anyone could say about Mike Tyson, you'd be like, well, okay, that's possible. Jeremiah Smith, anything you could say about him. He's the best receiver ever to come to Ohio State. He might be. He's the best freshman receiver ever. He might be. He has a chance to be the best receiver of all time to ever walk the earth. He has a chance. there are very few things in life that are hyped this much and exceed expectations. The first sports column I ever wrote, that's what I opened it with. 1 is Mardi Gras. 2 was LeBron James. 3, TiVo. That was incredible. Jeremiah Smith fits that category. I'd like both of you just to sit and talk about him. Bill, you've covered recruiting for a long time. Is he the best player you've ever seen?
Boy, I don't.
And if not, you tell me who's – time out. If not, you tell me who's better.
The first guy always comes to my mind is the Big O.
Yep.
Orlando Pace.
Mouth Orlando Pace as you did that. Go ahead.
I was mouthing it too.
That's always the first guy that comes to my mind. But I will say last night, we touched on it before the show a little bit, Dan. You mentioned it during this show. Was there any threat really? And Oregon goes down and makes it a 34-14 game. They didn't get the 2-point conversion. I thought, High State really kind of needs to grab the momentum back where we're right now. Well, when they needed, I said to my son, I said, Jeremiah Smith needs to touch the ball this series, this possession. And on the big third down play, Jeremiah Smith touched the ball. They got a first down, and the rest is history. They went down and scored, and any thoughts of an Oregon coming back, they ended right then in my mind. He's that good. I mean, the physical mismatch between he and those defensive backs last night was just glaring. He's as faster than them, and he's so much bigger. And that was kind of the thing with Orlando Pace. He was as athletic as any relatively big guy, but he was so much bigger than the guys he was playing against. So is Jeremiah the best ever? Well, to me, you gotta do what Orlando did. He did it, and he did it at the NFL level, Hall of Fame, all of that. So you got to do what he did first for me to put anybody above him.
I know, but sometimes the argument for others lets you know what you're talking about. We're already saying, well, he's got to do what Orlando Pace did in the pros, as if Orlando Pace never played in college. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is ridiculous. I had something I wanted to say there. Someone put this in there. Do you remember this? This came to my thought as well when Day was on stage during signing day, and they had found out that he had officially, locked it in and did like the knee buckle. Well, that knee buckle was, in retrospect, Oregon's mistake. You should have backed up the Brinks truck even bigger down in Hollywood, Florida. You blew that. We didn't. And I'm now going to turn the camera, microphone over to yourself there, Mark.
Herb Street throw out some great comparisons for him, like Brandon Marshall, Terrell Owens, Julio Jones, Andre Johnson. If you remember those guys in the NFL, they were pretty spectacular. I think Jeremiah will have maybe the best college career of that group. He's off to such a hot start, and primetime games, and playing extra games the way this playoff system's set up. Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. When you say best ever, like it becomes a positional thing. Like wasn't. I think we had this discussion on the podcast last year. If you were to start the NFL over tomorrow morning and have a draft of all the players, we made an argument that C.J. Stroud may be the first player picked in that draft. Is Jeremiah Smith the first player picked in that draft?
He would be in this draft if he came out.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there, but I think you say value of position and,
he's not a quarterback.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So
you opened up the NFL.
You opened up the can of worms, and I'm taking it to another can of worms. Yep. But like you said, like anything you say about this kid, it could happen. I've been saying the Calvin Johnson Megatron comparisons for months now, and that was a little maybe brash at the time where, you're allowed to throw out Brandon Marshall, Terrell Owens, and Andre Johnson, but Calvin Johnson's the leap too far. I think he might be, by the time he is trained up and dialed in, near that. And I think Calvin Johnson's one of the best that ever played. Like 6'4", 230 pounds. And the way, if someone came out in the college playoffs in the next week or two and put a double punt return up in Jeremiah Smith's face, would it shock you? I mean, 2 DBs up there in press coverage like they used to do to Calvin around the goal line and just say, hey, he's not getting off the line. He's not beating us. We're not letting him dictate. It really it's hyperbaric is what you said. Yeah, you can make these comparisons, and people really have a hard time arguing against them now. And it's easier to argue for the insanity he is, that type of player. He's really going to be.
Here's the thing. I will not relax. Secondly, funny you bring this up, Mr. Bucknuts, and by that I mean not the real Mr. Bucknuts. He does, and I exchanged text during the game with a NFL guy, and on the touchdown, the first touchdown, that was the name. That kind of reminded me of Terrell Owens, where he just kind of gets going north, and you're like a fly on the windshield. If you're a defensive back, you're not going to be able to tackle him. But I can tell you this. He has better hands than Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens' hands weren't great. He dropped a lot of key passes. Trust me on this.
Yeah,
Secondly, he's more fluid. T.O. had a certain kind of I don't know how to explain this. He was almost like power through skill kind of feeling, like he was powering through it. Jeremiah runs like a track star. He's way more fluid, and that makes you faster. So he fits his body so perfectly. T.O. was kind of like a jacked guy who, just overpowers you. I don't think
T.O. didn't run routes in the offseason, and that's why he looked the way he did. He had to power through stuff because he was not a polished. I just watched a thing with him where it wasn't until later in his career where his off seasons he spent running routes and doing. He said all he did in the off season was play basketball.
He doesn't have good hands. If you watch T.O., he was not a hands catcher. Jeremiah is catching balls on the sideline with his hands like T. Higgins does, where then he can hit the ground and the ball doesn't move, and he's got it like this just so he shows the ref, we're not going to replay here. You know what I'm saying? It really is.
One other point. During the draft last year when Marvin Harrison was going over Malik Neighbors, everyone agreed, and us Buckeye people, having seen, the Buckeye guy, we knew he was going to be the best. But as they get in the NFL, I talked to some I'll back this up a step. I talked to some receiver coaches at a camp, and they were bored, and they asked one of the best receiver coaches I know, and it's not the guy at Ohio State. They said, who do you like better, Neighbors or Harrison? And he goes, Neighbors, without a doubt. And so I think there's a flavor in receivers where we're not mentioning as comparisons to Jeremiah, like Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill or these guys that fit in other boxes of elite receivers. We're comparing him to the big elite receivers. And then that conversation is, who would you rather have, elite Tyreek Hill or elite Megatron, elite Andre Johnson, elite, like the bigger receiver is usually the guy that everybody clings on to. But I'll back up and say, having watched Malik Neighbors in the NFL, boy, I think they were right. He might be the better NFL receiver than Marvin Harrison. Marvin might not be the blow the top off the defense type guy and all the things that we thought that, and Kyler Murray has a pop gun arm. So that's not helping.
Don't get me started on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I'm not,
Kyler Murray.
It might not be apples to apples, but we dove into this deep receiver talk here. So the reason Jeremiah gets this unbelievable hype is he's a bigger receiver, which usually trumps the smaller guys. And as I say that, I'm so enamored with Malik Neighbors because of his explosion in the NFL.
I think Kyler Murray is now my least favorite player in the NFL. It was maddening to watch them play together this year. I'm not kidding.
I had him in a fantasy championship
last week. I cannot stand
week.
that guy.
And watching Kyler Murray not be able to throw out routes, put balls into the dirt, constantly throw underneath, you just want to scream when you need fantasy points from him.
No one quits on the called play faster than Kyler Murray because he's like 5'6" and he can't see anything. And Marvin is a technician, dude. If you put Marvin on the Rams this year, he would have led the league in receptions. So I do not want Malik Neighbors over Marvin personally. I don't buy that at all. I like Malik Neighbors. He's really explosive. He also got featured about 100 times in the first 3 weeks, so he became the flavor of the month. I'll take Marv any day of the week. Oh my God. I might move to Cincinnati if they did that. And I live in Dayton, and I could still get there. I'd want to cut down on my commute, though. Good gracious. All right. Bill, I don't know if you know this. People talk a lot about recruiting, about the team that Ohio State paid for. Somehow they overlook the fact that Oregon is writing checks like they stole something. How do you think this affects recruiting? Does it matter? Do you think Ohio State gained an advantage over teams like Oregon with a win like this? Or really when it comes down to it, and I said this too, for example, I don't think recruits care about the Ohio State-Michigan game. I don't think it has anything to do with Ohio State recruiting. If you can get them to the pros and get through the playoffs, they'll be good. Do you feel the same way about Ohio State beating Oregon, or do you think it actually has an impact?
I think it helps Ohio State's recruiting overall. The staff does a great job of taking advantage of things, and they're going to take advantage of what is going on the field now. Had they gotten beat by Tennessee, that would have put a gloom on things. Now it's nothing but roses, no pun intended. So I think it helps recruiting overall. Now, does it help against Oregon? I don't know that I would say that, because two things there. Oregon still has Nike and NIL. That is a huge in recruiting. There's no two ways about it. NIL is a huge factor in recruiting. So Oregon can still continue to do that, and I'm sure they will. The other big thing that recruits really talk about a lot, it is important, in addition to NIL, is development. Ohio State can really continue to sell development. How much has the development of the offensive line this year helped? It's helped a lot. I mean, say what you want, but that offensive line's right now pretty darn good, and not necessarily the highest rated guys coming out of high school, at least. Josh Simmons was not highly rated coming out of high school, not at all. And we've talked about, he's going to be a first-round draft choice in all likelihood, early second at very worst. So I think no doubt that it helps because of the overall outlook now on Ohio State. But as far as against Oregon, they're still going to be able to write the big checks, and they're still going to do that. So there's still going to be great recruiting battles moving forward between Ohio State and Oregon.
Brian Emerson, Oregon not going anywhere. And I don't want to pick up. I get all that. I'm not saying they're going anywhere. I'm just saying, by the way, if they didn't go anywhere and they'd be in the same spot, that means we'd pummel them again if you're in the same spot. So that'd be fine. But recruiting has changed. If you want to know how recruiting has changed, watch an interview with Urban Meyer these days. And he was mentioning that none of the staffs were out in December. No one went out recruiting. They just sit back. You come to the campus. You say it's going to take this much, and you move on. So it's not the way it used to be. It's not as romantic as it used to be in terms of building relationships. But here's the good part. We're at the front of the line here too. And Herb said this, and I kind of agree with him. I don't see us going to a salary cap where Purdue is automatically able to compete with Ohio State. That is not going. He's back, people.
Brad is back.
Brad loves a good W. But seriously, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think. Look how the rich has gotten richer. So when the rich gets richer, you know what they're not into giving away? Money. Oh yeah. That made my family's day right there, Dietrich. You doing that? I'm not kidding. And Brad was enjoying the heck out of the game last night. He couldn't believe there wasn't another holding call. How is that possible? I know. I don't want to say something negative. For anybody that hadn't been here, you have to mention again those stats on holding in Ohio State this year. It's almost feels fake, to tell you the truth. No Ohio State defensive lineman that starts has drawn a holding call all season. Okay? And how about this? When you go through opponent yards per game through penalties, Ohio State this year ranked 134 out of 134. So think about that for a second. Everyone agrees Ohio State has the most talented team. You tend to commit penalties when you're going up against more talented players, trying to hang on. Maybe throughout the game, you get a little tired. They stay huge. You hold. No. Somehow, Ohio State's opponents played every week against the most talented team in the country and played more disciplined football on the whole, penalty-wise, than all the rest of Division I major college football. That is just not fair. I don't care what anyone tells me, and I'm in no way blaming the refs for either of their losses. But that is not fair. And who saw the holding calls last night? Tyleik Williams was held on their touchdown. Go back and watch it. There's one play where Jaden McDonald, it looks like the guy's square dancing with him and then goes for like the three-point takedown with the pin. I'm surprised the guy didn't come there. So, all right. That was my ability to complain. Bill, take it from here. Let's talk quickly about Texas, your original vibes on Texas. For drama value, we already mentioned we got to go back to Jerry World. Last time I was there for an Ohio State game, by the way, it went well. It was against Oregon, and Marcus Mariota was there, and we won. But it's ironic, we will be going through Quinn Ewers. Old Quinn, who came here, picked up his bag, and went back to Texas. Your thoughts on going up against Quinn Ewers? Bill, you knew him a little bit low one day, and now he will be the man that tasked with going up against this fantastic defense. Your thoughts?
Yeah, a little bit different than Dylan Gabriel. Obviously, size-wise is a difference. But also, Dylan Gabriel, to me, is a better threat. You better keep Dylan Gabriel in the pocket like they did last night. I don't worry that so much about that with Ewers, but he is a quality quarterback. There's no doubt about it. I will be very interested to see the scheme, the plan Jim Knowles comes up with for this game, because like I said, I thought what he schemed last night was tremendous. Obviously, I like Ohio State, but I do have a little bit of a concern that basically it's a home game for Texas.
I'll tell you what, Mark, I'll let you take and run with this. I fear Dylan Gabriel more than I feared Quinn Ewers. A guy who wants to sit in the pocket and who also isn't the biggest dude. I mean, T. Doyle comes with what I was going to say. We may see more Arch Manning in the long run than we see of old Quinn. Your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I thought that the offense we just faced, I know they were minus two of their skill guys, was better than the Texas offense. And I was talking about Dylan Gabriel for 2 weeks, worried about 6 years of experience and 66 games and all the checks and reads he's been through a million times. Boy, I think you get a little, maybe Ewers maybe has some arm talent or something, but I think you get a better draw when you're playing Ewers than Dylan Gabriel. The defense at Texas, we'll see how that defensive line holds up. After watching the Ohio State offense and defensive lines, I want to see them again against another quality group to see, was that real? Are they really peaking? Are they really putting it all together? I mean, it was a lot of four-man rush, at least the second half out of that defense, where you were just letting those four guys go to work. Can we get away with that game plan again? Because as you saw, Dylan Gabriel didn't have anywhere to throw the ball with regularity. Every fourth or fifth play, he may find something, but the Ohio State with that many guys in coverage really did a good job of locking down a passing game. So I'm pretty confident that they can do that again. Defensive line, we'll see if they show up in Texas. I'm with you. I don't like having to go down to there and having that emotion in the stands and that stuff. But one of the comments earlier is I think this team could play anywhere right now and be fine.
Also, Jerry World is a Texas stadium, but it's built for all comers. I mean, that thing is built for you to – if you go to a game at there, they want that to be your one trip of the year. If you're a season ticket holder for another team, it's set up for that, believe me. And we've been there once before, like we said. Bucknuts 1 did fly out there. Will it fly out there again? Will I be on it? We can only hope. I haven't broached that yet. But I thought if I wore my All the Best Deli t-shirt today, that would increase my chances of getting on Bucknuts 1 should it exit out of a small Dayton airport in the Springboro area. By the way, flying private, is all it's cracked up to be.
I do
I'm not kidding.
I did take a selfie in front of All the Best Deli a couple of weeks ago. That might come in handy right now.
I'll tell you this. I got a text from Mr. Bucknuts a few days ago from his beachfront location, and it was of a yacht that was sailing by. And this yacht had a full court basketball on the front of the yacht. This yacht was owned by Michael Jordan. So he sent that to me and said, you should have taught your son to be 6'5". And I said, if I taught my son to be 6'5", we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd be on the boat with Mike. So we went like that. All right. We've done a lot of shows, people, this year, and some of them had an angst-ridden vibe to them. Guess what today didn't have? An angst-ridden vibe. That was as fun an experience. I'd like to thank the Buckeyes for doing that, by the way. There's nothing like being up 34-0 in a game like that. And it's not just, I don't know if you guys are like me, it's not just the game. It's knowing that all the coverage, all the comments I get at the supermarket, and every text I get from anyone who knows me will be nice. My quality of life goes up. That's what happens. I think for all the guys, I can speak like that. Congratulations to Ryan Day. Dude has been through a lot, more than I could have handled. And to stand there and watch your team be the best college football team that second on the earth must have felt great. Kudos to him and his family. Kudos. Hold on a second. Kudos to Justin Fry. This offensive line is, look, man, if you sit and talk about it, they lost their left tackle who's going to be drafted. They lost the Remington Award winner. They lost the backup left tackle. They've had issues at guard, okay? Somehow, at the end of the year, our offensive line is playing better than everyone else's offensive line, okay? And we talk about his ability to recruit. Nothing is going to help recruiting in the transfer portal more, and we've already proven this time, than what he did with Josh Simmons. Bill mentioned that. Josh Simmons was a right tackle at San Diego State that no one had ever heard of, okay? Now he is going to be one of the first left tackles taken in the draft, and he did that by coming to Ohio State and getting what? Developed. So it doesn't look like it used to. I mean, we've missed on some high-profile guys. I get it. But all that matters is the results. All these high-profile offensive linemen we go for, if any of them turn out like Josh Simmons, we've won. That's what people got to grasp here. I know it's not as sexy to go and recruit a guy and do that, but if you can take a right tackle from San Diego, and make him a first-round draft pick at left tackle, I would say you've done your job. Buck doesn't like that I'm talking. You're kind of a donk. And guess what you are? Gone forever. Ban user and delete their comments. See, this is what happens when I get the power. All right. Brian Emerson, you're here for life, bud. You know what you're talking about. All right.
I want to echo what Brian Emerson said, because that's what I was going to say, is if you saw Day's family at the end, and I think there was criticism that his family got up on the stand with him, and if you know what your family goes through as a coach and the days that your kids have to go to school after losing to Michigan and stuff like that, and the abuse your family takes from fans that don't exactly, I think, yeah, to see that moment, and if you that was the moment that I appreciated the most. This guy finally got the hug out of his family. Like, here, they knew this was a moment for him. And that's how important this win was. And I think that signified it. And hopefully this isn't over yet, because 3 or 4 years, they've had some tough days as a family. This was a great day.
No doubt. Day's a good dude, man. Yeah, I mean, he's a good man. Look, when you're a coach, imagine just turning on your television to any sports station and people getting on there who have never met you, know anything about you, claiming. I mean, every national pundit claimed for Day to be fired. You know what I mean? They don't know anything about the Buckeyes. So,
and you know
that's
what?
A lot, man.
They signed up for it. Ryan Day deserves it, and he needs but the kids and the family they're the bystanders. So when you saw them, kind of rush and the hugs and all that stuff, just well-deserved, because they take the brunt of that, because I'm sure behind their father's back, they're reading message boards and they're hearing comments from their friends. And, I think that we don't always, and every one of those coaches has a family, like we can beat them up, but when when you see their family in the public eye like that, it's kind of a moment that you kind of sit back and realize what this is bigger than football.
We appreciate everybody spending 50 minutes with us today. We are not going to 25. So the last 25 seconds is free, because the first 50 is free. We appreciate everybody stopping by. I don't know if there can be anything more glorious than this, but I have a feeling on how to make it more glorious, and that is by doing the same to Texas and Jerry World. We hope it happens. We will be here all day, every day. Until then, have a good one, Bucknutters.